It's already been quite an emotional journey for me this morning. I cried all through that early praise and worship. The worship, you have these kind of two phases, and then there's but the first phase got me this morning. You people know how to let loose. I'm telling you, praise God. I think God gave us Africans to teach us to jive. So good, ladies. You were awesome. And I was so blessed. I was crying. I was literally crying. You know, the trouble with us white folks is we sing songs like dance and shout. And what we do is we don't dance. And when we shout the word shout in the song. But you people go, and you do. Oh, man, I love that. So good. I mean, you do what the song tells you to do. We just sort of enact the word in the song. I think that's it. I'm telling you, this is so beautiful. You're so liberated, so on fire, so joyful. I was here with the young people, the youth on Friday night, you know. And after the meeting, they all had some other music on. I was trying to get in there. I mean, they were doing things like this, you know. I mean, I'm an old guy. I might lose my footing. And then the healing process takes too long to risk it. You know? But, oh man, it's so good to be in your liberated praise and to be in the presence of God like this. So good. And there's so many aspects. You know, my trouble is I come in here and I get baptized again into fellowship when I come here, because there's, you know, I really should get on with my message, shouldn't I? But I just got to tell you, I love you. You're amazing. I love this church. I love coming here. It's kind of like a homecoming, you know, to just freshen up. Because, you know, I'm in a contemporary, relevant, cool church situation. You know, our music's exceedingly loud and run by these, forgive me, but, you know, it's the hipster generation that are driving much of my church in the downtown of Vancouver. And it's cool. I love it. I love it. But when I come here, I feel family. I feel community. I feel the joy of what you've just done here. You know, we're just starting to have our baby boom. The hipsters have finally looked at each other in the church and decided to get married, decided to put it all in right order. It's quite amazing in our circumstances. And they're getting married and having children. And our church is gradually phasing into now a downtown family church, which is just you know, a miracle in itself. That is, it's not something that's been transported in, but growing out of a downtown community. So, honestly, it's such a joy to be here. If you saw me on my phone, I wasn't playing video games. I was sending little bites back to my team, saying, look at this, you know. And to my wife, she eventually had to send me a message back, Graham, I'm preparing for tomorrow. I cannot keep answering all your... So I blessed her in her preparation. Anyway, all so good, so good. Last night, you know, I try to work somewhat in the expectation of the office. I don't really give myself a title, but people often say Graham is prophetic and that kind of a thing. And I try to work in responsibility with that expectation. So be it if that's what I am. And last night I was musing, praying, working over this morning's meeting, and I jotted some things down which I felt the Lord give me, and I'm just going to say it up front and maybe get back to it at the end. But I want to bring a little word just here. It's actually, I think, very encouraging in your where you're going as a church and what you're doing. Now, the first sentence may not sound so, but it is, and we'll make some explanation of that when we preach. But here's the little prophetic word that seemed to come to my heart as I was thinking about this morning. It's something like this. If God has a no-show, if it appears that God hasn't shown up, it's because he's not necessarily in the show, but he's on to something else. Now, I don't want you to take that too far, because there are times when we don't feel and see, but God is there, right? But I'm just saying, in some of your effort, in some of your direction, if God has a no-show, and you discern that, it's not that you don't discern that, but if God has a no-show, he doesn't seem to be in it, it's because he's not in the show, because he's got another show that's about to happen. What he appears to be doing isn't all that he is doing. I felt to share this from the Lord. What he appears to be doing isn't all that he's doing. God is doing, we often say this, God is doing more behind your back than in front of you. You know, you and I and this church and your leaders, they live in a pool of light. But the light is like a shaft that's just coming down ahead of them to step into. You know, it's not like God gives you the full vista of where you're going. All right? And so, in actual fact, while it may be darkness all around except in the light in front of you, God is in there. You know? That isn't all the devil, that darkness. That is a whole lot God. The Bible even says that God is in the darkness. He's there. He's not dark in the sense that he's not a shadow, but he is in there. He's doing more where you can't see, in spite of all that he's doing in what you can see. All right? So I want to encourage you that there's something big going on in the planning of God with this church, and it's bigger than you think. The more God has in store is exponentially greater than what you can see he's already doing. And I really do feel like this church is coming to a maturity and a phase when the breadth of what God is doing is going to be revealed in coming years, and it's going to be mind-boggling. I know prophets want to say things like this. I know prophets want to say it's bigger, better. You know, no prophet wants to say you're going into a straightening time. No prophet really wants to say it's not going to be so good. There's a dark time coming or anything like that. And I'm definitely not saying that. But I have to shift against my tendency to be reserved to say that there is an exponentially overwhelmingly more that God is going to reveal about who you are and what you're doing and what you're accomplishing in his purpose. And here's my kind of fine little comment, really, as I was sitting before the Lord. He's not building a monument. He's building a movement through you. And when I say movement, I don't want it to be defined by its common usage in churches today. The common usage of movement today is probably just a cool way of avoiding admitting we're a denomination. But I don't think that's what's happening with you. God is building a movement. A movement is something that isn't controlled. A movement is something that doesn't have a proprietorial or control or whatever over its clientele. A movement is something that, we have people movements in the earth. The charismatic movement was one of them, one of the great moves of God in relatively modern church history. There was no organizational head of it, place for it. There was nobody controlling it. It's that people were buying into something from God that was a message. And I feel like you guys have a message. And here's the deal. I wrote this down. He's not building a movement. He's not building a monument. He's building a movement. A movement has a message, not trying to control a membership. Now, that's nothing to do with the local church. There's a place of membership or involvement or commitment. But in terms of the breadth of what God is doing out of this epicenter is a message that the church at large really needs. And I feel like I'm preaching a message before I got to my message because I feel so strong. And I want to encourage you as a church, you are in the flow of a word that the body of Christ needs. And it's going to help the church redefine what ecclesia, what church really is all about. I believe your pastors have seeded a vision that God is going to expand all the more and is going to help shift the church generally in a much wider sphere to what God really defines as church. Praise God. So I think I just delivered that. I'll leave that with you. But it's not a monument. You know, a denomination becomes a monument. You know, it does. You know, we've got the Lutheran monument. You know, we've got the Presbyterian monument to John Knox. We've got the Baptist monument to John Smythe, who started the Baptist. We've got the Mennonite monument to Menno Simons. We've got monuments, the Wesley monument, you know, which is the Methodists or Wesleyans. But this is not about that. I'm sorry, David. Sorry, Dave. We might have a plaque on the wall with your photo saying Founding Father. And you know, your real claim to fame is you made an incredibly good decision. That you married this beautiful lady who was multicultural, and it began something. Well, it probably was the result of something going on, your commitment. But you know, it's not a monument that you're building, it's a movement. It's a word from God that people will be buying into from near and far, and leaning over the fence out of their denominations to adopt and to read. I'm telling you, we're doing that. And I'm so delighted that David Chiu is coming up to our church very soon, because we just feel we have to capture something of what's happening here. Okay, let's turn to the Word. If you come with me to 2 Samuel 18, in fact, it's not my main text, though it's a fairly long text. It's not my main text. I want to quickly go through it. I want to just build a shoot over the head of you a little bit with this in getting to where I really want to go. But 2 Samuel chapter 18 and verse 19. And I don't know whether those guys, did you get that? Did it come through? Didn't matter. Doesn't matter. Okay. I just had a little title slide thing, but it didn't come through. So 2 Samuel 18, verse 19. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said, "Let me run and carry news to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies." And Joab said to him, "You're not to carry news today. You may carry news another day, but today you shall carry no news, because the king's son is dead." Now this guy wanted to run with the message, but he didn't observe all that had got on, and his message was only part. His part that he wanted to run with was kind of like the good news. Those that have been opposing you are beaten. They've lost the battle. But there was a component to that was vital to the king. His son had been on the other side. And so Joab says, it's not for you to run. All right? He's literally saying, wait another day. Know the difference between went and sent. That's my key shot for many of you here this morning. Know the difference between went and sent. There's a lot of people who are wenting. I'm making up words for those of you who are already trying to just, wade through my English and you're learning English. I'm adding to your vocabulary. There's a lot of people who don't wait till they're sent, but out of some itchy feet or desire to do something, they go. And I'm trying to say to you, it's not about went, it's about sent. Know your time. Know your time. And then Joab said to the Cushite, this is somebody else, you go tell the king what you've seen. Now this other messenger had seen it. He's got the full story. The Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. You see, until you've experienced the message, until somehow the message has got into you, you're going to have a borrowed message. One of the worst things is hearing somebody preaching beyond their experience in such a way that it's not revelatory. They have no authority in their word. There is a sense that when we have revelatory preaching, we all preach beyond our experience, and you can feel the touch of God in that revelation. But it's a sad thing when you hear someone preaching in a way and you're thinking, I wonder whether he really knows what he's talking about from experience, all right? And this is kind of what's involved here. We don't want to be people with borrowed authority. We want the authority that comes out of an authenticity of experiencing what we're about. I believe you have an authentic message, church. You're experiencing something. You're not just past tense with an eye to your present tense. You've got something to say about community, about family, about the nations. Oh, I was so excited about this. I was in the shower this morning and I discovered an old hymn in the deep recesses of my spirit. I got raised in the Baptist church and we used to sing, "We've a story to tell to the nations that will set their hearts to the light. A story of truth and gladness, a story of truth and light. And the darkness shall turn to the dawning, and the dawning to noonday." But I'm not going to sing to you, you know. I've got embarrassed by my voice already. But it does say at the end of that chorus, "And God's great kingdom shall come on earth." You know, there was a vision there about nations. You got it. You got it. You're a manifestation of that. You've got an authentic message. Moving on in this text now. Then Ahimaaz the son of Zadok said to Joab, "Come what may, let me also run after the Cushite." And Joab said, "Why will you run, my son, seeing that you will have no reward for the news?" "Come what may," he said, "I will run." You've got to know the difference between passion and permission. And we get so fired up with something, we want to do it, doesn't mean to say it's time. You know? And this guy, he's a good guy. He wants to run. He's got the passion. No. I'll still do it. But it wasn't his time. And so he gets a kind of a secondary type permission. Well, he said to him, "We'll run." Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the guy who had the real message. He outran the Cushite, you know. You might even get ahead of others. But you could also get ahead of your message. And I'm speaking to young men and women who are firing up with the call of God here this morning. You can get ahead of your message. Just hang in, hold in, stay in, because God is preparing you not only to deliver a message, but to be a message. Now David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof of the gate by the wall, and when he lifted up his eyes and looked, he saw a man running up alone. And the watchman called out and told the king, and the king said, "If he is alone, there is news in his mouth." There is news in his mouth. And he drew nearer and nearer, and the watchman saw another running. And the watchman called to the gate and said, "See, another man running alone." And the king said, "He also brings news." And the watchman said, "I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok." And the king said, "Oh, he's a good man and comes with good news." And then Ahimaaz cried out to the king, "All is well." In one sense, all was well. They defeated their enemies, but that wasn't the news that the king was looking to hear. All is well. You know, a half message, if you like. He's bringing a good word, but his message wasn't complete. I think sometimes in the completion of our message is the ability to handle the not so good word. The word that some need to hear or really have to hear or want to hear. And you have to have the skills and the graces in which, and the authority in which to deliver that respectfully. But this man, he's only got the good news. And he bowed before the king with his face to the earth and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who's delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." And the king said, "Well, is it well with the young man Absalom?" And Ahimaaz answered, "When Joab sent the king's servant, your servant, I saw a great commotion, but I don't know what it was." His message was incomplete. He didn't have that final bit of the news, the bit that David so necessarily wanted. And the king said, "Well, just turn aside and stand here." So he turned aside and stood still. So it's almost like saying, you need to wait. You haven't got your message sorted out yet. You haven't got it all down yet. You've outrun your message, if you like, and you've got nothing to say at the end of the day. Just hang in here. Step aside for a minute. And behold, the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, "Good news for my lord the king, for the Lord has delivered this day from the hand of all who rose up against you." So he has the same good news. Then the king said to the Cushite, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" And the Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up against you for evil be like that young man." And the king was deeply moved and went up to his chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son." I could get lost in that story and make more of that. But I just want to use that as a kind of an illustration from the Old Testament of someone who went that wasn't sent. in the first instance. We don't want to run ahead of our message. We want to become the message. And my good news for you really is I don't think this is a preemptive strike to you. I think this is saying you have a message. You're ready to run. But if there are some among you that are growing into your place and your calling, you listen up on this other wavelength, because don't get ahead of yourself. Be one who's sent rather than just got up and went. All right? Thank God for those who wait in the pastoral context to develop in the call of God into maturity, so that when they are able to be sent, and they are sent, they've got a full message. They can say it all with a certain degree of authority and authenticity. Now here comes our most important scriptures for the day. Galatians 2, 1 and 2, first of all. Galatians 2, 1 and 2. Then after 14 years, oh dear, everybody say 14 years. 14 years. And that didn't sound convincing, but that's probably the reason, you know. 14 years is a long time, right? Say 14 years. 14. I remember somebody telling me that Joseph had to wait 14 years for his vision to come to pass. And I was about 22. And the inference was, Graham, you've got some waiting to do before you did some wenting. I was about ready to bust out the door and try and plant a church. Someone said, you've got a lot of passion, you've got a lot of enthusiasm, young man, but I think you could wait. You know that Joseph waited 14 years. So 14 years became a bogeyman to me. Oh, like, what? I'll be that old? I'm 65 this year. I'm glad I waited. Then after 14 years, this is Paul, I went out again to Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along with me. I went up because of the revelation. He's got the message. Agabus' prophecy over him. This is going back a little bit, but we won't go in there right now. And set before them... sorry, I've got to get the verse again. I went out because of a revelation and set before them the gospel that I proclaim amongst the Gentiles, in order to make sure I was not running or had not run in vain. You see, even the Apostle Paul went through the process of developing his message by what was going on in his life. He waited his time. 14 years. 14 years. And then we come to Acts chapter 12, and this is nearing the end of those 14 years, if we get the chronology or the history of the progress of Scripture right. In Acts chapter 12, it says, and Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem, and underline this, when they had completed their service, diaconia, bringing with them John, whose other name was Mark. When they had completed their service, they returned. Now, what's happening now is a change about to take place in the history of Paul in the book of Acts. For 14 years, he was isolated, developing in his message, and he was serving the church. One of which was a need to take down an offering to Jerusalem because of a prophecy of Agabus about what is happening to the church through a famine. So Paul is growing in a local church scenario and serving. Diaconia, a deacon-type function. Not that he necessarily was a deacon, but he was serving in such a capacity. And I love how chapter 12 is coming to a conclusion, and it says, they returned from Jerusalem. They had completed that task, but I think it's saying more, because it goes on, when they completed their service, it's as if Paul has now come through his developmental stages of calling and ministry. The message is now well into him. He's now ready for something else. And Acts 13 opens up with this. Now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers. Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul, or Paul. And while they were worshipping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. And being sent out by the Holy Spirit, They went down to Seleucia, and from there they sailed to Cyprus. You might say from there, Paul begins his greatest stage of ministry. There was a phase 1, which was the preparatory stage. And I believe it's ending in Acts chapter 12. Acts chapter 13, Paul is moving into a new stage in his calling and ministry. It begins with these words, and Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had completed their service, and then it tells us that they're in the company of prophets in the home church, and it was time for them to be sent out. 14 years. I call it the life of P. Remember that book, The Life of Pi? The life of P. It's the life where the pastoral takes precedence over everything in your life, where you remain in the pastoral household, where you remain under the care of shepherds and those who are teaching you, instructing you, guiding you, informing you, growing you, and giving you certain opportunities to develop. And we're not talking about the phase 1 of Paul's life, but there were certain opportunities that were given to even the Apostle Paul, such a great man that he was from the very beginning, opportunities to develop. He lived under pastoral precedence. Pastoral priority, I probably should have said. And it prepared him, and it deepened his message, as he says in Galatians 2, in order that I would not run in vain. That I would not get out there and be like a Himeas. You know, Paul had certain qualifications. He must have been an exceedingly passionate man, just by personality. He had certain charisma. He was a dogged, determined man. So all of these things are very human. And he probably could have launched off and launched out and done something for God after his conversion. You know? But they pulled him back. And they kept him in. And he hung with Barnabas. He got mentored. I found out that Barnabas was a Cypriot Jew. So Paul, who was a Jew from Tarsus, a crossroads city of Asia. So here's Paul, who's also a Roman citizen. Now you think of the multiculturalness of Paul himself. A Roman citizen, he's buying into a system that's dominating the world in terms of certain degrees of its culture. He's also in Tarsus, in the crossroads of life in the then known world. So he's influenced, and he's from Asia, and he's also a Jew by heritage. So he's got a lot of cultural things implicating who he is, making him who he is, and he's under the mentorship of a Cypriot Jew. So like God, if there's ever anybody who's wired for the nations, it's Paul. Peter didn't have that wiring. I think this is your pastor's message. He's probably taught me this, at least I've stolen his notes, which I've never given back, and learned something from them. But here he is. He's now ready to be sent forth. He's done the life of P, the life of pastoral priority. He's kept in, he's held in. And phase 2 is about to begin. Phase 2 is the main stage. If that's the preparatory stage, there's the main stage. Some of you are getting ready for the main stage. I think this church is on its main stage. I think you are enacting and living and demonstrating your message very wonderfully across the nations. But I'm speaking to challenge a generation in this church that's coming up. And you're coming up to that time of being on your main stage. And here's what happens. As the prophets were there, they start prophesying. And the preparatory stage now becomes, listen, the prophetic journey. Now becomes the fulfillment of the words of the Lord over his life. He moves from all that shepherding, caring, somewhat restraining, modeling, mentoring into a new phase where now it's the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord says, release these two men to the work whereunto I've called them. And already there's been prophecy. Already there's been the inkling of the sense of God. Already in terms of mission and calling. And now comes the day by prophetic release, and they are being encouraged now to be let go to go and do the greater thing. They're getting on to their main stage. They finished the task at hand. The message was developed. Now let's get that message out to the masses. Let's go. They've done the diaconia. Now they're going to do the apostello. They've done the service on the inside. Now let's them do the sent. Well, that's what the word apostello means. Now, this profound sense of sentness that's in Paul, that itched in him from the very beginning of his conversion, because when he met Christ, part of that encounter was he was told that he's going to speak to kings and authorities and the Gentiles. And already there was the seeds of the prophetic working within him. And the trouble is sometimes we get a seed, a thought from God through a visiting prophet. And we think now's the moment, you know. But the Apostle Paul went through his 14 years of preparatory mentorship in the pastoral setting. But now he's been pulled out onto main stage to be released. And we won't go much about this, but there's a third stage in Paul's life, and I think this sets us all up for a 1, 2, 3 stage. We have the preparatory stages of getting authentic in our message, of being mentored, of growing, of being proven in the house, of being under pastoral care. That's a priority to us in that number 1 stage. We have the second stage where God opens the door, and instead of waiting, we are sent. Instead of just going, we're waiting the moment, but God knows the moment. God knows that you're prepared. And the amazing thing, often when God says this is the moment, we then sort of buckle at the knees with fear. Go, I don't know that I'm ready yet. You know, I don't know. How do I do this? How do I plant a church? How do I do this in another nation? How do I get up and go with this message now? But you're ready, and God, by sending you with the authority of the house, and the sense that God has sent you, that profound sense of sentness on the inside, makes you a message. And you step out with a degree of authority, and of course the hand of the Lord is upon you. But there's a third stage, and we see that coming about at the latter end of Paul's ministry life, in his third missionary journey, when God starts to speak to him about going to Rome. Now, it's not that he's winding down. I had a great talk with the young adults last night about being in the green square, which was sort of symbolic of being in the great position of being the inheritors of the dream. They're at the age and stage in life where they are being poised and made ready for the shift forward for the call that's on the house of God, the church, and so on. But that might be 10 years away. Who knows? I'm not trying to talk about that so much, but there comes a time when those that have led the church, they're not diminishing. It's not their demise, but the phase of their ministry changes, and they're in a succession mode. They're in a handover mode. I had to pull my leaders together about a year or so ago, and I said, I'm turning 65 this year. Now, I wasn't sort of subtly telling them I'm going on the pension and I'm leaving town. Mexico looks awfully nice when you live in cold Canada. And, some really nice places that pensioners go down there. And it's very cheap to live. And, so long as it's a gated community with a guard, it's quite safe, But the guards can actually serve two purposes and keep away people who want to come and stay with you that you don't want to have come and stay with you. But that's another matter. But anyway, you better get my humour if you think I'm too serious. But I had to say to my team, I said, because this team that I have in Vancouver, 16 years ago we planted the church, and about 70 or so young people in that early period got saved, filled with the Holy Spirit, and got established in church for the first time in their lives. These were mostly young people who had no church background whatsoever. They were biblically illiterate. They knew something of Christianity that was out there at Christmas time in the nativity scenes, but even that was getting taken away out of the commercial zone anyway. And so they were completely void, really, of any understanding of the faith. So they've come through. And the wonderful joy that Patty and I have is that as we've stuck with this, we've seen those, in the main, we've seen that core group of people now who got saved at the early stage of our church plan. They are now our senior leadership of the church. In fact, we ordained 4 couples just before I came away. 4 couples and 2 singles. And in the main, they were all from that period, and they've come through all their processes of pastoral priority, mentoring. I know some of them got a little itchy there, because I'm in a movement that's big on church planting, and if somebody from the movement comes through, or the denomination comes through, they're always selling a vision to, who are the church planters here? We're having a church planting school. And I'll be sitting in the front row going, oh no, God, please. My kids are so enthusiastic, they'll go to church planting school. Oh God, oh God, oh God. And then most pastors, would probably feel very condemned for praying that, but I was praying, Lord, don't let them go, don't let them go, don't let them go. Hold them steady, hold them steady. And I see their hand going, oh, I've lost him. I've lost him or her. They're going to church planting college. They're going to plant a C3 church in Europe somewhere or down in South America. Oh God. But I never meddle with that. It's their business, right? They're going to walk with God. But boy, I'm in my prayer room going, God, are they ready? Are they ready? Can't I have the joy of sending them out? And then they come to me and they say, Pastor, I thought, but God just told me I shouldn't go. And I go, sure, God. It's not that I don't want them to go. And quite honestly, I have released some with great joy. That could say a lot of things. But anyway, I'm not a controller. I don't possess them. But I tell you what, I have a vision that they get that in, the word in them, they become the message, and they don't just went, they're sent. And that somehow out of the message that we have a house, they are living that, and there comes a time and we go, God, we've got to get this out, and we get it out, not by just doing the short-term mission, which is where it begins, but we get it out by sending out people who are the message, and it propagates in other places because they are the message. Oh, praise God. Where am I up to in my notes here? Anyway, so that third stage of Paul is really not a demise or a diminish, but it's actually destiny. Paul knows that in the third stage, God's leading him to Rome. But Rome's much bigger than you think. Rome isn't just the end of the road for Paul in terms of what we now know by history. Rome is the shifting of the gospel westward into the capitals of Europe. Rome is the beginning of the great advance of the church, conquering nations. I don't mean through militarism. But in spite of what we know of church history, this is the beginning of a major shift where Rome starts to move across the great populations of the world. And forever you can track even now that the gospel had moved westward into our generation in a general sense. There's something happening here with Paul when he's going to Rome. It's bigger than even the people that he's reached thus far. It's setting up for the next great phase and move of God. And there's a lot more I could say about that, but that was the third stage. It's like you go the preparatory stage, you go the main stage for the main point of your, or main time of your life, and then you move into destiny, where it's not even about you, it's about what's coming as a result of you in the ongoing, and it's like you're fixing up the finishing touches on the package before it is time for you to get on the chariot and fly out of here. I've got to quickly finish up with something here, because this is about sent or went. And I just want to say these kind of principally now. Serving in the local church is your phase one. It's the New Testament proving ground of all effective ministry. Serving in your home church. Love this house. Build this house. Be a builder of this house. You might have a vision to build something for God. And there's a greatness in that. There's a goodness. The Bible even says that it's a good thing to desire the office of a bishop or a leader or an overseer. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But I tell you, it's a great thing to build the house of God. It's a great thing to be not just someone who turns up on Sunday, but who gets interactive with the life of the community that church really is. That church is not a meeting, but it's a community, it's a family. You teach me that. But that's the greatest thing that you can do in this phase, in the preparatory stage of your life. That preparatory stage may be 14 years, maybe 20 years, who knows however long. God, I think 14 for us in this message is only kind of saying a length of time. God determines that length of time. But the life of P, the life of pastoral processing, you just can't get around it. And in this day, that's quite a rare thing. I live in a culture of church where people actually turn up to church once a month and they say, I belong to that church. That's that in North America now, that's a common thing. I go to church once a month. They don't go to prayer meetings, they don't go to life groups, they don't get involved in other things. They come to a meeting once a month. I've got a few in our church. And if you were to say to them, what church are you a member of? Are you a member of? They go, oh, we're a member of C3 Church downtown. You know that church that Fletcher and Patty pastor in? And you know, they're authentic in what they say. But I see them once a month. You know? They're not builders of the house. It's like it's a great cafeteria. I joke with David, you know, you guys have a prayer meeting the day I come. You know, usually you have this amazing lunch of all your ethnic and foreign delicacies. I love coming here for the lunch. And you have a prayer meeting and you're fasting. Oh, gosh. But you're building your house by praying. You're building your house by having lunch together and outliving family and fellowship. You're building the house by engaging. If you weren't thinking of going to the prayer meeting today, feel convicted. You know, let's just double the number of the prayer meeting right now. Build the house. Pray. Be involved. You know. So in America and Canada, we have monthly turn-up people. You know? That's not community. That's not building the house. And it's great to see when people start to buy in on another level. I often joke, and I said this last night to the young adults, but I often joke to our church, the real church is what I see in the prayer meetings. Now, I'm not here going to condemn anybody, please. But you know, it's a joke. You know, I said that, didn't I? But you know, we can turn up this meeting. It's a great thing. We all, Sunday morning church is always our showroom. You know, we all turn up. But the prayer meeting, we've got people who are convicted and convinced that this only works at this level because that works in that level. The people in the prayer meeting are bringing heaven down to earth. The people in the prayer meeting are living in the full belief that they cannot do this without that or without Him. That's where our dependence is. And, you know, for whatever reasons you can't get to a prayer meeting, be a contributor to the life of the church by your spiritual involvement. So serving in the home church is your phase one and the proving ground of all effective ministry. But it's also where your message is becoming more certain. It's when you get up to say something, it's getting very authentic. And when you get your message, when God feels that's right and ready, then you get your mission. You get the message, God will give you the mission. Somebody gave me a word of wisdom many, many years ago. It would be back in the 70s. And it was a hand-on from a missionary who said, I just get the message, God gives me the mission. I get the message and God gives me the people. You know, I live in that ethic even now as an itinerant prophetic person. I don't have a card with Prophet Fletch, please have me in your church. I don't even have a website that's all about Fletch. You know, I've got a funny, horrible little photo on our church one, just so that people can say, is that the church that Fletch? Oh yeah, that's him. Sort of like the one off my wanted poster down at the police station. But I don't market myself. I don't do that. I don't need to. All I've got to do is get the message. And even now, in this stage of my life, it's about getting the message. It's about having something authentic and of value to say. Something that I'm processed in and through. And it gives me opportunity because God then opens the doors and says, I want that message in there. And I find the invitations come. That's how it works for me. You get the message and God will give you the mission. So herein lies the importance of completing the task. It's like Paul and Barnabas, they completed the service. They did what they had to do in that final act of deaconship, if you like. By going to Jerusalem with the money and being faithful and delivering it and not pilfering it on the way, spending it on ice creams. That's a big temptation, isn't it, David? Serve until sent. Serve until sent. You're processing a future much bigger than yourself. Serve until sent. You're ensuring a diminished future is not decided because you just went. And this is the problem. I've seen people with great gift, great calling, great capacity. They've learned enough to get them somewhere. And they went. They went before time. They were not sent. And you know, they get something. They get something going. There's some record of God blessing their faith and doing something through them. But sometimes I make my own assessment. I think what they could have been with such gifting. But it wasn't all about their brilliance. It was about a profound sense of sentness which they didn't seem to have, and they went before they were sent. Servant or sent. There's no better place to fulfill your service, the deaconing dimension, than here, before God gives you the apostello dimension. Let me just say something about the 14 years. 14 years, Paul awaited this moment. In those 14 years, he actually had some of the deepest and most profound revelations that any man in the church age ever got. But he couldn't even run out and preach those revelations. He could have said, I've had an experience of God. He could have said, man, nobody's been where I've been into the third heaven. Here's the deal. Please forgive me. I've just got a little humorous cynicism. But I see guys who advertise that they've been to heaven. And they're telling people about what heaven's like. And they're using all the metaphors of the most metaphorical picture language book of the Bible, which is Revelation, to say what they saw. Now, I'm not even negating their experience of something. But when I look at the Apostle Paul, he went there and came back and said, God told me to zip the lip. He couldn't even tell us what it was like. God said, Not even the great revelator of 2/3 of the New Testament gave us a book on what he saw. You know, because it wasn't about that. The Apostle Paul waited his day, 14 years. You know that Jacob served Laban 14 years before he got Rachel, the woman of his dreams. You know that, I've already mentioned it. But Joseph dreamed of rulership, the call of God on him. 14 years of processing before it came to pass. And now we have Paul, who has this tantalizing revelation of God and heaven and what it's all about and where it's all going. And yet he waits 14 years before he goes. 14 years of the life of Pete, pastoral priority. 14 years of being proven and the message being produced in him before he's finally sent. 14 years. 14 years might seem like a slow train coming. Oh, God, wish you would hurry up with the preparatory stages. Oh, God, I think I'm ready. He said, no, you're not. But let me tell you something about a slow train. Now, I'm in Canada, the country of big trains. Really, the Canadian Pacific Railroad is legendary. These trains are literally kilometers long. Kilometers. You do not want to get caught at a country railway crossing when a train's coming. You could be there like half an hour or more. And these massive trains, they might have 5 diesels with big CPR on them, Canadian Pacific Railroad. They're the ones you've seen in those old posters snaking around the bottom of mountains in the canyons. They say, come and have a look at this, tourist, this is amazing. These massive trains, kilometers long. And here's another thing. They have containers on shipping, the biggest shipping containers are 40 foot, the big one. But they have them doubled and tripled up on top of each other. They can't come through the cities because the bridges are too low. So you think of a tonnage and weight that's on a massive train. Let me say something about that. I'm going to read it off my notes because I think it's good, and I decided that it was good because I wrote it myself. Better a slow train coming on the track delivering 1 million ton of goods to to a great future than a fast train on a track to nowhere. We can't speed it up. But those big trains pull a whole city's worth of food and provisions. Those big trains that are slow are coming in with something far greater. And I feel that the intent of God on this church is amazing. You're pulling stuff into cities and nations, and I think you're on your main stage. But I know that in a time not too distant ahead, there will be a transference of authority and grace. But at this stage, you've got your message, and you're building a movement, not a monument. You are a people under the hand of sent, not just upping and going. It's not went, but sent. So young people, hang in here. You're on a good train to the greatness of what God's got for you. Would you stand with me, church? Hallelujah.